For
Okay,
this,
good morning.
For me, this is a milestone. It's the first time I'm finishing a book in Daf Yomi.
Wow, congratulations. So wonderful. Glad that we are having you with us, and wish you an absolute mazel tov. So let's do this together. This will be awesome. So one of the most classics, 4-time repeated Gemaras is the words that we'll be using to end our Masechet. But before we get there, we have to talk about Ziva. And now I'm not talking about the character on NCIS, but rather the flow that can come from a man or a woman. From a woman, any kind of blood flow or any kind of flow that's not during her time of her period. But for a man, it's some kind of emission that actually is not a seminal emission. And we'll need to do some checking to see whether or not it will trigger a Zava calculation. So let's take a look and let's see what the Mishnah says. We're at the Mishnah near the bottom of 65b. It's 1, 5, 10, about 15 lines up from the bottom of 65b from Samach Hayam Abed. Today's daf is Samach Vav. The last and final daf of Masechet Nazir. God willing, tomorrow we'll begin with Masechet Sota. So the Shiva Drachim Bodkin is up. There are 7 different ways that if you have where we got some Mefarish, we got some Tosfos, we got a little bit of everybody. But let's take a look. So we start with the Shiva Drachim Bodkin is up. 7 ways that if a man has some kind of flow that is not a natural flow, then we're going to check him. And and if in fact these check out, well, then we're not going to treat him as a zav. But ad shalom nizkak l'ziva. This is talking about before the person has been considered a zav, meaning that when we say that we do these 7 checks, this is talking about where somebody has not yet been a confirmed zav. So what do we check? The machal mishta. We check what they drink. And let's jump right into the Mefarish. The Mefarish is on the left-hand side of the page. We're near the very bottom of the narrow lines. And it says, B'achilu v'shtiya. Machmas rov achila v'shasiya. Because of the great eating and drinking, that if you eat a whole lot or you drink a whole lot, so then hadrachim ha'murim kan, so then you might actually result in a flow, and as a result, and that's why we're doing that. So v'hadrachim hamurim kan mivina adam lidei ziva, and all the different things that we're talking about here are things that could cause somebody to have that kind of flow. So that was item numbers 1 and 2, food and drink. Now 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. What are they? The masa, with carrying, if you carry something very heavy, so then that could be a problem. Ukvitsa, or if you do a lot of jumping, if you're doing a lot of exercise, and then it turns out that something happens, and so as a result, that might cause you to have a flow, or v'choli, or if you're not feeling well, uvimara, or if you see something, and what is that talking about? So there's a machlokas between Tosfos and the Mefarish. The Mefarish says, last of the narrow lines, uvimara shira shade, that you see some kind of demon, odavar akar v'nivchad, or some other thing, and then you become very afraid, machmato, as a result of it. Vahavi onus, and the whole thing is that in all these cases, the man ends up with a flow that was involuntary. And so as a result, he should not be treated as a zav. That's the halacha that we are learning at this moment, that even though by the way, I will note, and we will see it shortly, that a woman who has a flow, it doesn't make a difference whether it was involuntary or not. If whatever the flow is, it could potentially be a zava flow. So that is the story, and that's what the Mefarish says. But the Tosfos says something different. We take a look in the Tosfos, within the Tosfos that says with the heading B'Shiva Drachim, it's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th to last Tosfos. Within that, there's a little heading within it that says B'Machul Mishtu Masav Kvitza Uv'Mara. So b'mara shira ish v'isha niskaken zelzeh, that if you see two people copulate, and we know that that's the case, v'chein mashma b'sechas zav, and we actually have an implication that that's the meaning of mara. The Polygrab Yehuda v'omer afilu ra behema chaya ba'of niskaken zelzeh mahar hair. So that even other things could also, even seeing animals copulate, that could also trigger these kinds of feelings. So the bottom line is that we've got these 7 different things. And in all of these cases, if in fact we confirm that this is going to be one of the causes, then we will not treat the flow as a zava flow. It cannot make the person a zav. However, and now this is the key next line, Misha nizak leziva, once the person has been considered a zav, so they've gotten, a man needs 2 flows. And once the man has 2 flows, then he's considered a zav, that he needs to wait 7 days of 7 clean days. So then, so then we don't check him to see whether a 3rd flow is considered part of this of his ziva, meaning is caused by something else, but rather we will attribute it to the first 2 flows, meaning the first 2 flows indicates that he's got an issue going on and he's a zav. And so until he gets better, until he has a 7 clean days, we're going to treat him as a zav. So onso usveko the shichvat zvaro tmeim, and once we have him treated as a zav, well then any kind of ones, any kind of thing that happens, that he did not do voluntarily, or cases of doubt, and we'll define that in the Gemara, or when he has a seminal emission. So in all of those cases, it's tamei. He is tamei, and the resulting product is tamei. Now we'll also talk about the seminal discharge one, because every seminal discharge is tamei. So for our daily purposes, we don't actually really address that tuma because we don't generally factor in Tuma and Tahara, but it is very important if somebody were to want to go to the area to go up the Har HaBayit, which is why we recommend people not to go to the top of the Har HaBayit in Yerushalayim, because there you need to be very careful, and you can't go up there at all if you have not gone to the mikvah since your last seminal discharge. All right, sure, Glayim L'davar, because in all of these cases, and again, now we see the magic words that tell us why we've learned this entire Mishnah here, because we've been learning a series of Mishnayos that reference Raglayim L'davar. And so too here, we've got a Mishnah that references Raglayim L'davar, that the matter has legs. What do we mean by that? The point is that we have a basis. We already know the basis of which to say that the person is tamei, because he had 2 flows already. And so once the person has 2 flows, so we're going to treat the 3rd flow as also a zava flow. And so that is the analysis, and that is what we mean when we say shiraglayim l'davar. Okay. So in fact, let's take a look. I did not darn it. I hope fine. Okay. I did not write it here, but I'll write it now. So let's take a look at the Mefarish, 3rd of the wide lines in the Mefarish, Shiraglayim L'davar, Shelo ba makmas onso. Because we already know that he was a zav, we have a basis on which to say that this was not, his most recent flow was not actually based on an onus. It was not based on something that was involuntary, ela machmas ziva mamish, but rather it's because he was a zav, because of his already flow that existed. Okay, so now we take a look at a new topic. And again, this new topic, we're changing topics. And here too, we're going to reference a matter that has legs. And so that's why it is going to be referenced here. So we change topics. This is actually comes from a Mishnah in Sanhedrin. And what do we say? Hamakes chaveiro, if somebody hits somebody else, which I do not recommend, you should never hit somebody else, but v'amadu lamisa, and people figure out that, oh my gosh, the person hit him so hard that the person who was hit is potentially is struck mortally and is potentially going to die. But then, thank God, then he gets better from what it was. But unfortunately, then it gets heavier and worse, and he dies. So the person who did the hitting is going to be subject to the death penalty, because the person the hitting that was done was was a sufficiently bad hitting that it was capable of killing the person. But Rabbi Nechemia Omer Patur. Rabbi Nechemia says, no, you can't actually kill the guy because we don't know for sure that is the result, that the guy died as the result of it, because shiraglayim ladavar. And here, what do we mean shiraglayim ladavar? Let's take a look at the last of the mafarish in the Mishnah. It's 1, 2, 3, 5 lines down, end of the line. Rabbi Nechemia Poter shiraglayim ladavar shalom ba machmas haka. We have a basis to say that this did not come as a result of the hitting. Because he was beginning to get better. And so since he was beginning to get better, we can't just ignore that. There's a basis to say that he was on his way to health, and therefore the person who did the hitting should not be liable because maybe it wasn't the hitting that caused the death. Okay, so that's that. And so now the Gemara wonders, Mina Hanimili. So tell us, where, how do we know this? Now, what is it that we are trying to figure out? Minani Mili. So let's back into the Mefarish. We see you got a lot of Mefarish today, Mark. So Minani Mili, Demission Nizkak Lutuma Ziva Shuv Ein Bodkino. So the question is how do we know that once the person has been determined to be a Zav, that he has had a flow for two flows that constitute a ziva flow, and now he's considered a zav. How do we know that now when he has another flow, we don't check to see whether or not the flow was some kind of involuntary action? Well, Rabbi Nathan gives us the answer. So Rabbi Nathan, Krav Hazav as Zovo, right? The pasuk says that let's read the whole pasuk. So the whole pasuk is V'hadava b'nidata v'hazav et zovo l'zachar v'lanakiva u'ish asher yishkav im tmeya. So, but the key part is the middle part of that sentence. So v'hazav et zovo, that when he has someone who has had when the zav has had a flow, so whether it's a male or a woman, whether it's male or female. So why do we have all of these pieces? Meaning, why don't we just say someone has a flow? Why do we need the male or female piece? And why do we need to say that the someone who's a zav has a flow? Just say ishet zovo or somebody. Why do we need to specifically reference the flow essentially 2 times and then mention man and woman? So what is Rabbi Natan explains that this is because that a man is compared to a woman for the third flow. And what did I say is true for a woman is it doesn't make a difference whether or not it's an onus or ratzon. It doesn't make a difference whether or not it was involuntary for a woman. And so therefore, just like a woman's third flow, just first flow is considered a ziva flow, if in fact she is considered a ziva flow, irrespective of whether or not it was voluntary. So too, after a man has had 2 flows, because what do we have? Take a look in Tosos, second to last Tosos on the dot. Mina Hani Mili. So what does, we didn't, let's go through and see what it is. So Mina Hani Mili, Vahazav, right? So a zav, the reference to a zav in the pasuk, Re'iyah Rishona. That's the first flow that the man has. Et Zovo, Re'iyah Shniya. That's the second flow that the man has. So l'zacher l'nakeva, and then when it says to a man or a woman l'zacher l'nakeva, so that is shlishit. That's the third flow. And ikshe rachmana l'nakeva, and so we've connected the man to a woman. V'nakeva mitama ba'onus, and a woman, even if it was involuntary, is considered a zava in that situation. So that's the story. But now we have a problem because we have a brisa that suggests that the first 3 flows for a man we're going to check. But Tanya Rabbi Lazar Omer Bishlishit Bod Kinoto. That's actually for the third check. For the third flow we also check. The Revius Ein Bod Kinoto. It's only the Ein Bod Kinoto. It's only the 4th check that we don't actually, the 4th flow that we don't check him. So Ella be'etim kamiflagi. So what the argument is about, this is an argument among Tanaim, and the argument is that it is whether or not we darshan the s, whether or not the word et, the, can be learned from. So Rabbi Eliezer in the brisa that we just quoted, darish etim, he says that we focus on the 8, and therefore when the pasuk says the hazav et zovo, we end up counting 3. The hazav is flow number 1. Et is flow number 2. Zovo is now flow number 3. And so when do we actually connect the man to a woman? It's the 4th flow. It's only then that we say l'zachar l'nei keva. And so that's the way the Rabbi Eliezer in our brisa derives it. Whereas Rabbanan lo darish etim. When it comes to the rabbis, when it comes to Rabbi Natan, who is giving a more general view, so then they do not derive things from the word et, and so as a result, there are only 2 flows. That's the hazav et zovo. So then only on the 3rd flow, that's when you don't do the checking. Okay, so moving on in our Gemara. So what is the talking about when we say onso usfeko? So there could be an onus or a suffix. So what is the suffix that we're talking about? So Amarava lo tema, as we turn to Samach Bavim and Aleph, lo tema suffix chaza suffix lo chaza. When we say that there's a doubt, we are not talking about a doubt about whether or not the person had the flow. We know that the person had the flow. Elavadai chaza, he definitely saw something. So now the question is what was it that he saw? That's the question. Suffix machas shechvat zera. The question is was it due to the fact that he had a seminal emission, and meaning that this seminal emission is really what he had, and that there is other stuff mixed into it. Or maybe it's its own flow, and it does not have anything to do with a seminal emission. But once the person has been considered tameh, speko tameh, so then we are going to rule in that situation where we're unsure of what the contents was of the flow. We're going to say that he's going to be considered tameh. Okay, so that is the meaning of doubt in this situation. So now, and so the point is that, if in fact he's got he's trying to count 7 clean days, this kind of flow, this uncertain flow, will unfortunately count against him. Okay, so the next piece is, as we continue the 2 dots at the top on the 4th line of Samach Vavim and Aleph. So Shichvat Zarot Tameya. So again, the seminal discharge that he has is Tameh. Well, what in the world are we talking about there? So Lemai, what are you talking about? So the first possibility, which isn't even an answer, it's part of the question, is Ilema Lamaga. If you want to say that it's talking about touching it and that contact with it will cause a person to be tameh, why would you even think that that would not be the case? When it comes to the seminal emission of somebody who's tahor, that's also going to be tameh. So of course, if the person's a zav, it's going to be tameh. So ella zaro shel zav mitameh b'masa. So rather, answer number 1 is that we're talking about the situation of carrying it. Now, this is important to know that for many things, if you do not touch it, so for example, if I have in this mask, if I put something in this mask and now I'm carrying it, but I'm not touching the object in the mask, well, then I will not become tameh because I am just carrying it. And so I'm pretty sure that well, I don't want to say for sure because I'm not 100% sure. So anyway, but the point is so for some things, if I'm carrying like this, I'm not going to be tameh. Well, we can do an obvious one. If this contained for some reason a seminal emission, so then I would not become tameh as a result of carrying it. However, what we're saying is that if that seminal emission was from a zav and I was carrying it like this, so as a result, again, I'm not touching it. I'm not an ohel over it. I am just carrying it, even though it's not, there's no way in which I'm otherwise connected to it. So that is going to be enough to transfer tuma. but now we're going to challenge that answer. We are going to come back to this answer when we on try number 3, but right now we're going to challenge it. So man shamat lahada amar shechvat zera shel zav mitame b'masa. Well, who do you have to cite for this concept that maybe the seminal emission of a zav will actually cause tuma through carrying? Ilaima haitana. If you want to say that it's Rabbi Yehoshua in the following brisa, listen to what he says in this brisa. Titania, Rabbi Eliezer Omer. Rabbi Eliezer says, "Shechva zaro shel zav eino mitame basa." So the Rabbi Eliezer says absolutely not. The seminal emission of a zav will not cause tuma through carrying it. The Rabbi Yeshua Omer mitame b'masa. Rabbi Yeshua says that it contaminates through carrying. Well, that's good news, right? It would seem like we can now rely on Rabbi Yeshua. But listen to the next words that he says, because now he's going to undercut the possibility that Rabbi Yeshua could be the basis for our Mishnah saying that shechva zaro tme'ah through carrying. So, because what does he say? Why is it that it contaminates through carrying? Because it's impossible that you don't have some little bits of ziva flow. So as a result, it is not the seminal emission that actually causes the tuma through carrying. It's the ziva flow that causes the tuma through carrying. So afilu Rabbi Yeshua lo amr ela mishum tzichatzuche ziva. It's only because of the tzichatzuche ziva that we've got the flow, the droplets. So el aval be'enei. But if you were to only have a seminal emission by itself, lo amar, he would not say that it causes tuma through carrying. So Ella Amar Rav Ada bar Ahava. So now we get to the second answer. So the second answer is as follows, and is said by Rav Ada bar Ahava, who says Lomar she'ein tolen bo. No, what it means is that we have this rule that you don't connect it. Well, that's kind of obscure. So thankfully we have the Mefarish to help us here. So Ella Amar Rav Ada. This is 1, 2, 3, 5 lines down in the narrow lines on the right-hand side of the page of the Mefarish. So we say, again, where Rashi ordinarily would be, but we are not sure that this is actually Rashi. As we come to the conclusion, we should remind ourselves of that fact. So, my hadika amar de shechvat zaro tameu. What is? Why do we say in our Mishnah that the seminal emission is considered tamei? Lomar, it's really telling us she'ein tolen ba, that we don't connect to it. That once one has been considered a zav and is considered tamei, imra keri, if one sees a seminal emission, and then the ra'aziva, and then one sees a non-seminal emission, eino taziva kekeri. We don't treat the non-seminal emission as if it was a seminal emission, because in general, tiahi because we learn in Masechet Zavin a special rule. Haroa keri einu mitam v'ziva kol me'atlei. That once you have a seminal emission, if you have a further emission within the 24 hours after that, we are going to attribute that additional emission to your seminal emission. And so as a result, any flow that immediately follows a seminal emission is not going to be treated like a seminal emission. And so as a result, what we're saying now is that when we said in our Mishnah that the seminal emission is tamei, we're going to say that this seminal emission won't trigger a 24-hour safe period for further flows, unlike what we said in Masechet Zavin. So that is the proposal, and now Sav Rav Papa kamei de Rava lamemar, and Rav Papa explained to in front of Rava, saying the following. Let me try to explain why this would be the case. Maybe it's because, why is it that ordinarily a seminal emission will make a further flow within 24 hours considered something that is not a zava flow? It's because when you have the seminal emission, you become weaker. And therefore, it's like an onus situation. And that's why, just like in the onus situations in our Mishnah, where what did we say about those situations? If you are not yet a confirmed Zav, well, then those onus situations will not have that flow count towards a potential Zava calculus. We won't count them. But if you are already a Zav, well, then we will. So using that by analogy to the story of the seminal emission, when we say that the seminal emission is Tameh in our Mishnah, what we're saying is that also we distinguish between, are you a Zav or are you not a Zav? If you are not a Zav and you have a seminal emission, well, then for the 24 hours that follow, you have a protected period where if you have a further flow, it won't count towards your Ziva status, your Zav status. And on the other hand, if you are already a Zav, well, then when you have a seminal emission, it does not give you any additional protection. And if thereafter, even immediately thereafter, you have a Zav flow, then tough luck, it's counted as a Zav flow. So it makes a lot of sense to say like that. But Amrle Rava explained back to him, I'm sorry, Rav Papa, that just doesn't work because we have a Mishnah. And that Mishnah says the following: V'hatanan Gershon is Gayer mitamim miyad beziva. That if a non-Jew converts, and the Mefarish says that we're talking about somebody who's already had his circumcision. So we're not talking about somebody who's sick as a result of their circumcision. Well, the ein lecha choli gadol mizeh. So now, if what you're saying is the fact that this person who had a seminal emission should be treated as if they were a sick person, and therefore treated as if it's an only situation, that doesn't work, because the Mishnah says that even in the case of a non-Jew who had a seminal emission on the day before his conversion, or the day of his conversion, and now he's converted, and less than 24 hours after that seminal emission when he was not Jewish, has a different kind of emission, has a potential Ziva emission, we will not treat that Ziva emission as connected to the seminal emission. And if you want to say, Rav Papa, that it's because that the reason that the seminal emission is a problem, is going to not give protection when you're a Zav, is because we're treating it like a sickness and like an onus situation. Well, here we should certainly treat this like a sickness and an onus situation. And the Rush specifically references here. We won't go through it inside, but the Rush specifically references that the point is that when somebody adopts being Jewish, when somebody adopts being Jewish, so then when somebody adopts being Jewish, so it is as if they are taking on a load. They are and that load causes nervousness associated with the obligations of being Jewish, and therefore, when they're already weak, if they're weakened as a result of seminal emission generally, well, then they should certainly be weakened by a seminal emission in this situation. And the fact that we don't treat them as weakened by a seminal emission, and we don't treat this as an onus situation, shows that it can't be that the explanation of the seminal emission and the explanation that was given by Rav Ada Bar Ahava, that the whole point of, if you want to go downstairs, Mark, can you go downstairs? Do you mind going downstairs to the Beit Midrash to the second floor? No. That they could use your help. Okay, thank you. Okay. So if you the fact that they didn't do this, the fact that we don't make this point in connection with a convert, and we don't apply this same leniency to somebody who had the seminal emission before they converted, shows that it's not about the health situation. And so as a result, Rav Papa's explanation is rejected, and the Gemara now goes back, and Rava offers us and asks that we go back to the original explanation. So Ella Tanaihi. Rather, this is all a machlokas Tanaim. And yes, we had earlier cited Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua as saying that a Zav does not transfer Tuma, the semen of a Zav does not transfer Tuma via carrying. But we actually have somebody who suggests that it does. The Tanya Shechvat Zera Shel Zav Mitame B'masa Kol Me'etlei, that a seminal emission of a Zav, if it's within 24 hours of before the seminal emission, there was a Zav emission. Well, then we are going to treat that seminal emission as if it was also a Ziva emission. And Rabbi Yossi Omer Yomo. Rabbi Yossi says, no, it's only for one day. And this is true, even though Rabbi Yoshua said something similar, saying that we treat it as something that can cause tumah through carrying, because of course there are droplets in it. But in this brisa, both the Tanna Kama and Rabbi Yossi do not tee this up as saying it requires that it's because there are bits of ziva in it, but rather it's because within a certain amount of time, we are going to treat that seminal emission as a zav flow. Okay, and therefore, if you carry it, even if you don't touch it, you will become tamei. And so, b'mai kamiflagi. So, what is it that now in this brisa, the Tanna Kama and Rabbi Yossi are disagreeing about? Why is it that the Tanna Kama says that you have a 24-hour period when the seminal emission after a zav flow will be treated as something that causes tumah through carrying, where Rabbi Yossi says that's only true for 12 hours, they're only true during the daytime, and as soon as it becomes nighttime, it's not true. B'di Shmuel, they're arguing about something that Shmuel raised. The Shmuel, Shmuel posed the following contradiction. See, it says in one pasuk that, what does it say? We're talking about psukim in Dvarim Kav Gimel pasuk Yidal. It says Ki yevecha ish asher lo yiyeh tahor mikra laila, that when there'll be among you a man who's not tahor as a result of an incident at night. So here we say that we're talking about something at night. Uksiv lifnot erev yirchatz b'mayim, and then the next time it says towards evening he's going to immerse. So we have a night reference and we have a towards evening reference. So what's the story with these two references that potentially could arguably contradict or conflict? So Manda Amar Me'es La'es Dayak Milifnot Erev. So the one who says that we're focused on a 24-hour period, that's the Tanna Kama. So he says that let's focus on Lifnot Erev, meaning that you have a towards evening. So the double language of Lifnot Erev, rather than just Ba'erev or whatever, or Erev, Yirchatz B'mayim, it tells us that we're talking about something extra, more than just the original amount. It would be double the amount. So it would not just be 12, but rather 24. V'ida. And Rabbi Yossi says, Dayeg Mikrei Laila, that when we say that we're talking about something that happened at night, so it's at night. The point is that the night just gives us one extra word, and we're going to say that is when as soon as it becomes nightfall after the day on which the Zav had his emission, so then we are going to say no more. That's it. You don't go a full 24 hours. So now the question, Umanda Amar liv mi lifnot erev haksiv mikra laila. Well, why do you need what does the person who says that you learn it from lifnot erev say, given the fact that we also say mikra laila? So Amar Lach, he will tell you orcha dekare l'masya b'laila, that it's not telling us anything new at all. It's just telling us that the general situation where one has a nocturnal emission or a seminal emission is a nocturnal emission. It's a seminal discharge at night. That's when it usually comes. And so as a result, because there's nothing special about the reference to night in that pasuk, so as a result, that's what we're learning from it. So that's why we should not learn from Laila, but rather from Lifnot Erev. Okay, so that brings us now to the closing Mishnah of Maseches Nazir. So, and we come to a very interesting question of, was Shmuel Hanavi a Nazir? So Nazir Haya Shmuel Kedivrei Rabbi Naharai, that Rabbi Naharai would say that Shmuel was in fact a Nazir. Shene'amar umora lo ya'ale al rosho, because when in the course of the tefillah of Chana, so she says that no morah will go on his head. And what do we see elsewhere? Ne'amar b'Shimshon umorah v'ne'amar b'Shmuel umorah. And well, it says by Shimshon also that a no morah shall come on his head. in Shoftim, Parak Yud Gimel Pasuk Hey. And so as a result, we're going to say that just as Morah with respect to Shimshon indicates that he was a Nazir, so Man No Rosh Hamura B'Shimshon Nazir, just as the Morah that we talked about, that you shouldn't have a razor on the person's head, indicates that Shimshon was a Nazir. Af Morah Hamura B'Shmuel Nazir. So too it refers to Shmuel. The Shmuel must also have been a Nazir. So Amar Rabbi Yossi says back, well, 1 second. V'halo ein Morah ela shel basar v'dam. Maybe Morah means some kind of fear or some kind of concern about other beings, about human beings, about people. So Amar lo Rabbi Naharai can't be that, because if Chana had the tefillah and her tefillah and her prayer was answered, well, then we would not expect that to ever see Shmuel express fear about a human being. But that's not the case. V'halo kvar ne'amar v'yomer Shmuel echelech v'shama v'shaul v'haragani. That when it came time to anoint King David, so Shmuel said to God that, listen, how can I go? If I go, Shmuel's going to learn about it and he's going to kill me. Shekvar haya alav morer shel basar v'dam. So we see that there was fear for him about a human being. So that is the end of our discussion of Nazirut. And now we have a Gemara that is not really related to our Mishnah, but also contains an interesting discussion between, and in this case, an agreement between Rabbi Naharai and Rabbi Yossi. And so that's why we're going to quote this, and then we're going to close with the closing that we see in Maseches Brachos, here in Maseches Nazir, in Maseches Yevamos, and in Maseches Krisus. And you may have noticed that I said Beis, that the initials of that is Beis Nun Yud Chaf, and we'll see that that's actually going to be relevant as well. So Amar le Reb Chia Lebrei. So Reb Chia said to his, Amar le Rav Lechia Brei. Rav said to his son Chia. What did he say? As we turn to Samach Vav Amud Bet, the final Amud of Maseches Nazir, Chatov Uvrich, grab quick, be quick and make a blessing. Now, what does that mean? So let's take a look in the Mefarish. So where it says, Chatov kos, grab the cup, shel bracha, of making the bracha, ubarich, and make the bracha. Birkat zimun. We're talking about the bracha of zimun, of leading the benching. Shetehei mekayim levarich al hakos birkat zimun, because you'll be able to fulfill the special mitzvah of blessing on a cup, the birkat hamazon. So that's what we're talking about. V'chein amar le Rav Huna lo Rav Abrei, and Rav Huna also told Rabba his son the same thing. Chatof uvrich, go take the opportunity to make the bracha. L'meimra de b'varich adif. This would seem to imply that making the bracha is better than responding and saying amen. But we have a brisa that suggests otherwise. V'hatanya Rabbi Yossi Omer. And again, here's the Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Naharai. Rabbi Yossi says, Gadol ha'ona amen yoter min ha'mevarach, that it's better to say amen than it is to be the one who makes the blessing. V'amar lo Rabbi Naharai, and Rabbi Naharai said to him, Hashamayim kachu. Yes, heaven says that that's the case. By heaven, I know that that's in fact the case, because Teda shahare gulyarim misgarin b'milchama the giborim notzchim, that you have regular soldiers are just going to fight. They're going to be engaged in the battle. But when it comes to the giborim, they're the ones that are victorious. Meaning the point is that who's the one who's on the battlefield at the end? Those are the giborim. The giborim are the ones. And so as a result, when you get to conclude, when you say amen, you are saying, I am the champion, that I'm going to, this is the emphasis. It's you get the double credit. You get the credit for the bracha, and you get credit for the amen. And so it's as if you are double dipping almost. But so Tanaihi, so it's second. So could it be that Rav Huna and Rav would teach their children that to try and be the one to say the bracha? Because it's actually a machlokas Tanayim. The Tanya, because we have another Baraisa, whereas Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Nahurai both say it's better to say Amen. Here we have another Baraisa that says the following: Echad ha'mevarech ve'echad ha'one Amen b'mashma. That when it comes to the one who says the bracha and the one who responds Amen, both of them are implied in a particular pasuk. Now, what pasuk are we talking about? We're talking about the pasuk in Tehillim Lamed Dalet, where it says, "Gadlu la'Hashem iti uneromima shemo yachdav." That declare the greatness of Hashem with me, meaning the one who's saying the bracha is saying to the person who's saying Amen, listen, why don't you declare Hashem's greatness with me? Because I'm going to say the bracha. And then it says, and let us exalt his name together. And that exalting of the name together is everybody else saying Amen. So both pieces of that are implied in this pasuk. So Ella Shem Maharin L'Mevarech Tchila. But when it comes to God's messengers, so they and take a look at the last mefarish. We'll do the perfect way to end. We'll do the last mefarish here on the daf. So Elishim and Maharin l'mevarach tichila litain skar. That when it comes to the heavenly emissaries, they rush to the one who said the blessing, and so to give that the extra skar to the one that said the blessing. So we see from this brisa that the one who says the blessing is the one who deserves the reward. And this highlights an interesting topic that I'll just mention very quickly, which is one of the awesome things about Judaism when it comes to these philosophical discussions, is that you actually have sources and citations for both sides of this interesting philosophical debate. Is it better to be the one to initiate the moment of blessing of Hashem, or is it better to be the one to say Amen to that blessing and to validate it? And both of them have their place, and both of them have their champions. And so with that, we're now ready to conclude. And again, these words exist in at the end of 4 different Masechtot. There's a little bit of extra language in Maseches Brachot, and you'll recognize this potentially from the end of Tfilah, the end of the Ein Kelokenu and Pitom Kitoris Tfilah that we say, that Ashkenazim say immediately after the Musaf Shmona Esrei on Shabbat. And what is that? So let's take a look, and we'll conclude with that. And again, this is in 4 different Masechtot: Brachot, Nazir, Yivamot, Kritot, and we'll see that the word Banayach and Bonayach is going to be key in what we're going to say. So Amar Rabbi Lazar, Amar Rabbi Chanina, Talmidei Chachamim Marbin Shalom Ba'olam. The Talmidei Chachamim, those who learn Torah, they bring peace to the world. Shene'amar v'chol banayach lemudei Hashem v'rav shalom banayach. That when it comes to your children, and all your children will be students of Hashem, and abundant will be the peace of your children. And we then, and what is said in Masechah Brachot, but does not appear here, is al tikrei banayach ela bonayach. Don't read it as banayach, your children, but rather bonayach, your builders. And the builders in the world are those who learn Torah. And so, as we finish this Masechet, we should count ourselves among the builders of Torah, and we can say, Hadron Allah Hakutim Ein Lahem Nazirus, Hadron Allah Hakutim Ein Lahem Nazirus, Hadron Allah Hakutim Ein Lahem Nazirus, V'Slika La Maseches Nazir. And we have now finished V'Slika La Maseches Nazir, V'Slika La Maseches Nazir. We've now finished Maseches Nazir. May we have the opportunity to return not only to this parak, but to the Maseches many, many times. And we will, God willing, begin. I didn't scroll my screen. I'm sorry about that. We will begin with Masechet Sota tomorrow. And again, I'll note that this ending of it's an easy way to remember that these 4 Masechtot have this same ending is because the initials of those, it's an acronym for Banayach/Bonayach. And so may all of us be able to recognize that first, may we all be students of Hashem, and the second is may we all be Torah scholars and help increase the peace in this world. And with that,
Indeed,
I'll
amen.
say amen,
Amen, that's right.
and God willing, I look
Amen.
forward to many more opportunities of learning together, and we'll pick up with Masechet Sotah, God willing, tomorrow.
Thank you so much. As always,
you.
great.
Be well.
Welcome.
Have a great day.
Yes, see you.
Bye-bye.